Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first live broadcast of Moving Past Trauma, aka Moving Past Murder. A long time ago. I'm going to take these headphones off because you guys aren't used to seeing me this way, but I had to quality control what we're doing here. So, live on YouTube. This is exciting because, guys, all I got to say is, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Moving Past Trauma. I'm your host, Collier Landry. So good to see all of you, even though I can't see you, but I see you in the comments over here, which is kind of cool. But I'm so excited because I have been wanting to do this forever. I've wanted to host this show live on some sort of platform. And I was talking over with my people and I was like, I'm just going to do it on YouTube with all this big YouTube explosion. Thank you so much. I want to give a shout out to all my subscribers. Thank you guys for subscribing, and a extra special shout out to those of you who are my channel members here on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. And of course, how can I forget about all my wonderful Patreon patrons? Thank you so much for all joining, all supporting this program. And I just love you guys so much. So thank you. Thank you. So latest breaking news in the sort of, I guess, true crime. Let me go back a few minutes because this has been a really difficult week in the United States and around the world, as things of these nature are. But I wanted to sort of say, how great was it that we could get back to some just celebrity sort of trash gossip trial stuff with the Gwyneth Paltrow case, which, as you guys may or may not know, Gwyneth Paltrow is officially $1 richer. Yes, that is correct. She won her case against this guy. I cannot remember his name. I have it here in the show notes somewhere. But she was being sued, for those of you that didn't know, about a ski accident that happened in like 2016. And she chose to fight it instead of just paying this guy. He tried to sue the ski resort. He tried to sue the ski instructor. He tried to go after everybody. And he claimed that his life just wasn't the same and he couldn't travel and do all the wonderful things. Even though I believe it was either today or yesterday, Paltrow's attorney had shown lots of videos and pictures on social media of him gallivanting about the planet. And so his quality of living wasn't really that affected, I suppose, for him to be able to get on airplanes and travel around the world and take photos. It's one of the things you got to watch. Social media is navigating parasocial relationships in general, and it's something that I have a problem with. I have many people that reach out to me on social media. I try to just reach back out and respond to people's messages, but it gets very difficult. And then sometimes they get kind of angry with me, or they think I'm being prevaricative, and I'm not. I'm just literally don't see the messages. But I'm trying to get better at that. But yeah, people are just posting everything on social media all the time. So how could you sue someone and say that your quality of life is interrupted? Then your quality of life is pretty much not interrupted. So there you go. I'm going to look over here. So I'm not really familiar with this platform, just so you guys know. This is StreamYard that I'm using. They should pay me to say that. So, and probably, well, until I get my eyes fixed, I got to put on these glasses. Jen Nelson, thank you so much for contributing for the little badge or super sticker or super like, whatever it is on YouTube. Sorry. Thank you so much for that. But anyways, yeah, so it has been a very interesting week in the social media realm because, was it this week or last week? No, it was this week. The head of TikTok appeared before Congress, and obviously this has been a very hot button issue since the Trump presidency about TikTok and Chinese spying and all these things. And there was actually a bill that came out that I believe was struck down yesterday in the Senate. It was Senate Bill S-686. I actually signed a petition for it and emailed my congressmen, representatives, and senators in the state of California here, because it had some really far-reaching things that it was doing. That went far beyond the realm of TikTok, like being able to monitor anything that comes out of a broadband router in someone's home and things of that nature. Now, I am not someone who has a proclivity for conspiracy theories or anything like that, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But it was just definitely very interesting to see the amount of questions that were leveled at this guy, and also how incompetent some of our representatives are when asking these questions. It was very wild to me. But so anyways, speaking on the social media front, but here we are live on YouTube. So that's what matters, because this is a fantastic platform. So yes, Gwyneth Paltrow won her case against this guy whose name I should probably pull up. And I'm used to doing this program, as you guys may or may not be aware, where I just talk right to the camera and I read notes that are over here next to me, which is sometimes why I'm wearing my glasses. But the gentleman who she ended up winning against was an optometrist named Terry Sanderson. So that was an interesting thing. But I just, every time you go on YouTube, you see Law and Crime Network, which was the place to go for the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial. And I thought, oh, wow, this is just, it's so refreshing given the other news that's going on, which we'll get to in a second, in the true crime world. But I was like, a good old celebrity gossip. I mean, they spent 8 days on this case, 8 days at trial for this thing. I mean, what? I don't know, but I found it fascinating, to say the least. So anyways, and this week also, so for those of you that are fans of the Murdaughs and the Murdaugh case and were as obsessed with it as I was and my friends were, this week, it's interesting because when you think about the justice system, and as someone who has a lot of experience in the justice system from a very young age, it almost seems a lot of times that the justice system, unfortunately, works almost in reverse. And as is the case of this Stephen Smith, whose body was found on June 8th, 2015, on the side of a road in like the middle of the low country. Like, already low country South Carolina is in the middle of nowhere, but this was like in the middle of nowhere. When I was raised as a young teenager in Ohio, we called this BFE, but effing Egypt. But they call it the middle of the low country. So this gentleman's body was found, and there's a massive conjecture and speculation having to do with this particular case. And I'm sure many of you listeners are all well more versed on this than I am. But at the core of this was somehow how the Murdaughs were involved in this case, and how SLED, which is the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, how they handled the case. And they came out with a press release, I believe, this last Monday, that said something that was kind of striking as you go through the meat of the statement. It said something, and this is what it said, which I found interesting. It said, SLED's investigation into the death of Mr. Smith was never closed. It remains a homicide investigation. Progress has been made, and SLED's investigation is active and ongoing. Which I think a lot of people had sort of dishearteningly felt that case had fallen apart or fallen by the wayside, obviously with the spectacle of, obviously the tragic death of Mallory Beach and all the attention that family has put with their legal counsel on that, and then that getting pushed into obviously the corruption, or obviously the murder of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, but then the exposed corruption, the opioid addiction, everything that came out of that case. And it feels like this was the precursor to all that. So, his mother, Stephen Smith's mother, Sandy, she was interviewed in one, if not both, the documentaries that I watched on HBO and then on Netflix. And, this poor woman is just looking for answers. And she's talking about how her son, wanted to be a physician, wanted to travel overseas and do like the Doctors Without Borders thing. I mean, seemed like a really good-hearted kid who unfortunately lost his life and is literally found in the middle of the road. And it's very unfortunate, but it does look like for that family that there might be some, I don't want to call it closure because it's never closure. There's so much that goes into a family's pursuit of that in the legal system. I don't think you ever get closure from any of this. Well, I know you don't ever get closure. Just speaking from someone who has dealt with this his entire life, you don't ever really get that perceived closure that people think that you're entitled to or think that is so necessary for you to carry on in your life. It just doesn't happen. you just sort of figure out a way to like hammer your way through it. You're chopping wood, you're carrying water. You just focus on the essentials and like, this is what I got to do. And I'm going to get into this in a little bit, but, and more, but it looks like there's going to be some action in this case. They revealed this week that a rape kit was done on his body as well, hours after the discovery, but was never analyzed. And there's no confirmation of where this rape kit is or why one was even given in the first place. Because remember, there was this was ruled like a vehicular, not homicide, but a vehicular manslaughter, an accident where this kid was, crossing the road or walking in the middle of the road and got hit by a car. And now and to say sort of that they never ruled out a homicide, they've been treating it as such, is a very interesting sort of twist of fate. But nonetheless, really hoping that these people can get, some closure with this, or at least the essence of what closure would look like. And so when they give this R kit, I realize I can't say the naughty words on YouTube, but the R kit that they give you, or SA, because they believe that this person was assaulted in that way. It is very interesting. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. I really hope the family gets some sort of justice. I mean, I don't know what else what they could be. I don't know. But getting answers is always like that one step closer, because for myself, I was always trying to find out like why my father murdered my mother, right? And it was a big question on my mind. And sort of, for those of you that know my story, that was the anvil or the albatross around my neck, the anvil over my head for my entire life, and trying to find that until I realized that really you never get that closure. And that's what I ultimately learned. So I hope that they do that. I hope they get that. Now, speaking of another very high profile case right now, there is obviously this whole kerfuffle in this Idaho 4 case, which I've touched upon. I posted a video yesterday regarding a conversation I had with a woman named Dr. Danielle Slakoff, and we were discussing the media conjecture, the tabloid conjecture around the Idaho 4 case, and how that conjecture and how the amateur sleuths, and there was a big article in Vanity Fair a few weeks back discussing this exact same thing, with how everyone was seemingly drawn to the small town of Moscow, Idaho, where it's like the University of Idaho, and that's it. And look, I went to music school at a very small, it was a big school, but it was in a very small town of Athens, Ohio University, go Bobcats. And I know what that small town college life is like. The college is the center of the world. And for those of you that haven't been fortunate enough to go to university or go to that type of university where you are literally in a town that is completely centralized around the university, it's a wild experience. So when something that is absolutely devastating as 4 college students being murdered in their off-campus home, it attracts a lot of attention. And the way that the media sort of just on this small town, and anywhere, we're talking anyone from, Nancy Grace from the, Dateline people at the top of the pile to online amateur sleuths via Twitter or YouTube or TikTokers all going there to try to find answers. And this particular article in Vanity Fair, for those of you that hadn't seen it, centered around this one bar that's in town where everybody went to. And I'm trying to think what like the one bar that we went to. It was on State Street. I don't know. I was like underage when I went to college, but I of course partook and found a way to make it into into the bars, of course illegally. But in all seriousness, the way that they diverged on this town and the way that these amateur sleuths literally tried to expose things and try to come up with their own hypothesis, or they hypothesize about what motive is or what the victims were doing. And one of the things that I think, when the court of public opinion's vitriol or just pure like laser focus, it becomes like so myopic, right? On the perpetrator and what they've done or what they've perceived them to do and what they have already convicted them to do is that it becomes a complete fallout of devastation on everyone that that person has ever been involved with. And unfortunately, this week it was revealed that there was that Brian Koberger's two sisters had been either doxxed online or had been outed on where they worked because they apparently work in the mental health field, I believe, and that these people were, that these women lost their jobs because of this. And apparently, according to news media, Brian Koberger's family has not visited him in jail yet. The family seems to be very removed from this. And as someone who has also, when I explain, let me just take a moment to say that when I explain all of this to you guys, it sometimes becomes lost on me and how weird and unique my situation was as a child, because my father is both the perpetrator and my mother is the victim. And I was the witness. And how I can fall into both sides of that is very, I mean, I feel like it gives me a unique perspective, right? But it also just, it sucks. It sucks in a lot of ways because, and I've talked about this in other podcast episodes, but I can empathize with the family because they don't want anything to do with what has happened. They're not responsible for it. So why are they? This man hasn't even gone to trial yet, let alone been convicted. But all of a sudden, we are somehow, these people are held accountable for his actions. And it's not fair. I know life isn't fair. I know there are many people that might think, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. But these are innocent bystanders. This could be, and granted, this is a murder, and this is something that is very sensitive, and these are 4 innocent lives lost. But it would almost be as if your own brother or sister or mother or father was driving intoxicated and killed a kid in the crosswalk because they were intoxicated. You have absolutely no control over that person's, if you didn't feed them the alcohol and give them the keys to their car, that is. But they didn't enable this behavior. They didn't condone this behavior. They didn't encourage this behavior. They were probably just as shocked as everyone. It brings me back to, I have a very good friend of mine. Her name is Melissa Moore, and she is the daughter of the Smiley Face Killer. And she's going to be on the program at some point. We were actually discussing it yesterday. But one of the things that she had to reconcile is when she found out that her father was this horrible person that she just thought was a horrible person because he was a horrible person, not because he had taken anyone's lives. The guilt and the shame, and I talked about this again in the Murdaugh pieces that I've done, the guilt and the shame that comes with all of that. I've also talked about my sort of getting over the guilt and shame in my life for what my father has done and what my family has put on me because of that, and society in general. But also, when somebody related to you has taken the lives of other people and caused such collateral damage, it just seems rather unfair, to be honest with you. I'm going to adjust this camera, by the way. So for those of you that also don't know, I am a professional cinematographer, so that's hopefully why my stuff looks really good. Looks really good for everyone. But so now I'm going to adjust this camera and do a couple of things. I am not on this particular site. Let me see. Let me make sure y'all can hear me first. Nobody's saying, oh, okay. Oh, I see a ton of context. Thank you so much. I've been on for 18 minutes. And I know there's Danielle Tamaro, who is on my Patreon, who consistently will message me and say, make fun of me about my glasses. Danielle, this is your opportunity in the comments to make fun of me about wearing my $5 Amazon readers. Anyways, back to Koberger's family. How people can hold innocent bystanders accountable for something that has nothing to do with it, because they are victims in a way that Not obviously not the victims who were killed, not the 4 college students, but their families are victims because they are ancillary victims. And this is something that I was very passionate about growing up my whole life, is our media or people's attention in general. And this is long before true crime was ever a thing, by the way. But I was very, very passionate about the fact that we would look at a case and we would say, okay, bad guy goes to jail, the state gets his restitution, the gavel hits, we say next, the victim is dead, all that. And we don't really examine the real consequences of violence outside of the sort of core unit of people, right? So my mother is dead, my father goes to prison. That's it, right? You maybe look at me and my sister or my family sort of, but you don't look at like the communities that are affected, right? The small college town, for example. I believe they've demolished this house, if I'm correct. And that often gets lost. And also who gets lost is the people that are related to the perpetrator of the crime. And to have them lose their jobs is just, it sucks. It's terrible. It's not their fault. And they shouldn't be held accountable for something. And the guy has not even been to trial yet. On top of that, also in this week's news about the Idaho 4 cases, apparently now Internal Affairs in that Moscow Police Department has decided to open up an investigation against officers' conduct surrounding some sort of evidence in this case too. So, I mean, like, who knows? And then this is why I'm not going to get on the soapbox. But I will say this. This is why I think when you go back to things like amateur sleuthing, like people who are doxing people online, people that are so vested in these situations that have nothing to do with law enforcement, by the way. It's not law enforcement. Like people who want to solve crimes, who think that they can somehow know more than a trained law enforcement or forensic psychologist or professional does, or somebody who has decades in law enforcement, to think that they somehow know something, then they're not directly connected to the case. It's utterly fanciful, and it's dangerous because things like this also can corrupt a case that's in progress too. And lawyers, and I shudder to think about this with my father's case growing up, because there was no internet, there was no, no TikTok, no Instagram, no Twitter, none of that. I don't even think the internet was maybe sort of in somebody's mind in the ether. But we're talking 1990, and it was just news trucks and newspapers, right? And that conjecture and speculation that would go on, I can't even imagine. And the fact that I was able to have, or my family and my mother was able to have swift justice, and how that is almost completely changed now because of so many, and lawyers just ride things out for years and years and rack up bills and everything. And we saw this obviously with the O.J. Simpson murders, of course. And we see this with other cases where they just continually go on and on and on. And there's no end in sight, right? That is a really unfortunate sort of consequence of violence. By the way, I will notice that I have been on for 22 minutes, and I was really worried if I could talk longer than 30 minutes. I should know myself a little better than that. Because I am a talker, and I think that's fitting for a podcast, right? So sisters lost their jobs. Other true crime updates. So a case has been very passionate with some of my friends is the case of this little boy, 5 years old. His name is Michael Joseph Vaughn. Now this little guy went, he is from, I think it's Fruitland, Idaho. And he went missing on June 27th, 2021. He has 3 other brothers and sisters. He was home alone with his dad. Mom was at work. It was the evening. Dad went to go attend to the other kids or something. It's a 5-year-old kid, right? Wanders out. I mean, I wander out in the street, so whatever. He wanders out into the street, and apparently he gone to 2 or 3 neighbors' houses to try to play with some kids. And so Dad lost track of him, and he was never seen again. And there was a lot of speculation. There was a lot of, speculation of parents being involved and things of that nature. Last year, I believe it was November of last year, 2022, there was a warrant that was served on a neighbor's house who was like 4 blocks away, but in the same housing development as where the Vaughn family lived. And this woman, Sandra Wondra, her husband is currently either in jail or waiting trial, or is in custody, or is in, he's in custody, whether he's incarcerated, he's in jail for some gun charges or some charges of firearm charges issues. I don't know what I can say on YouTube, but please don't cancel the algorithm. What he's away. She had apparently made a statement of something that God, the Lord, higher power, spiritual person told them that her husband had taken the life of this poor child. And so they went to this house to try to excavate a body from this backyard. And apparently they hadn't found anything. Apparently, also this week, it was released that they are now charging her, just this week, with a failure to report and concealment of concealing a murder, essentially, concealing evidence of a felony. And she has 2 hearings that are going to be scheduled. And the thing is that, and again, sorry, the quote is failure to report the death of Michael Vaughn. So the police haven't ruled it a homicide yet. They haven't found any remains. The family still doesn't know what's going on. Yet they've ruled this as a failure to report a homicide because, like she said, a higher power spoke to her, God, whoever said that her husband had killed this little boy. And that's why they executed the search warrant to go in the backyard and try to find evidence and things of that nature. It was a big kerfuffle. It was happening all around the same time as the Moscow, Idaho incident and all these things. So it gets lost in the fray. But there was a big update with that. So hopefully there'll be some closure for the Vaughn family, because there's just... it's very tragic, and the child has just disappeared. And there's no answers, but they're charging someone with a failure to report a homicide. So, anyways, for more information on Michael's case, can be found on the Fruitland Police Department website, which is Find Michael Vaughn, Fruitland Police website, or at findmichaelvaughn.com. Shout out to my friend Lana for bringing this to our attention. I wanted to let you guys know about that case. So, obviously, the big news of the week, besides Gwyneth Paltrow winning $1, is there was another mass shooting in the United States. And I have, that is my phone ringing to tell me to do some things. Okay, so I want to give some shout outs right now. Again, bear with me, guys. This is my first time doing this live podcast, so I'm still learning. So I appreciate your patience. So I want to do some shout outs. Hey, look, Black Eagle is here. Hi, Plant Freak. Hi, Sandy Hart. Kim Shorin, thank you so much for Jam. Kim Shorin, Sandy Hart, Manic Alien, and Kim. I met Kim Shorin last night on I do Patreon live meet and greets where you guys can actually interact with me in person and I can see your faces, and it's very exciting. I do this every month through my Patreon. Oh, look, I can make it bigger. So maybe do I not? I just love Steven's mom, Laura Davis, twin sister. They're in my prayers. Well, that's so great. Hi, Forgetful Lucy. Hi, Brenda Fisher. Hello to Sandy Hart, my family, Forgetful Lucy, Black Widower, Danielle Tamaro. There she is. Oh, I'm sorry, Black Whiter, Paige Davis, Manic Alien, Television Eyes, Barb H1, Jam, Forgetful Lucy. Thank you all so much for joining. Hi, Tara Newell is in the house. Tana, hi, how are you? Thank you so much, Tana. And Tana has seen my film. Thank you. Deb W., Tina Luffman, Lena. Oh, okay. I got to get rid of this. These little things are popping up because I've never used this before. And it keeps popping up. And let me make this little camera a little better there. I'm being a bit pedantic about the image. I apologize, guys. You will not be making fun of Collier tonight. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Lena Beautiful, Claudette Chikora. And thank you so much for everybody who has joined as well. Kim Shore, and thank you for joining the channel. Bree Mountford, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for the super sticker. This is super sweet. Carol Gardner, thank you so much for giving some support. Tara Newell, thank you so much. My family, thank you so much. You guys are amazing. Axtastic Axtastic B. Rachel, thank you so much for joining. Rachel is also a part of my Patreon, and she lives in Mansfield, Ohio, where I'm from as well. Hi, Tara Benesh. Good to see you. Haley Ray is in the house. Thank you so much. I see a lot of you guys. I also do Instagram Lives every Tuesday at, what time is that? At 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time as well. And I'll probably be putting those here on the YouTube channel for everyone as I develop this channel more and more. But thank you everyone for your support. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna get back into what I was talking about because yeah, we had another mass shooting here in the United States, and this is tragedy. Of course, it's horrific, and of course, every time this happens, it stirs up debate, and I will get into this debate at some point. I'm not going to get into it tonight about guns and the United States. I get so many questions, especially when I'm doing lives from people who are not from the United States that are very, very interested in our gun culture and also very interested in why these mass shootings happen. And then, of course, we see them in other countries too. And there's violence that goes on outside of the United States. I feel like a lot of media attention is directed towards that, but really it happens everywhere. But this has caused, obviously, a massive amount of debate. There was protests today at the Capitol in Tennessee, at the Capitol building, and people being forced to do things, and their senators saying, well, what can we do? We're not really going to be able to do anything because people will do crazy stuff. And people will do crazy stuff. And firearms are a very real part of American culture. They are built into our Constitution. I don't see a way out on any of this. A little bit of crackle. What does this say? Yes, there's a little bit of crackle. He will fix it for next time. So on the crackle note, I believe that this is from Squadcat or whatever I'm on, the StreamYard thing, because I had that happen the last time I was on StreamYard. Claudette Chikora, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate it. I will try to figure out all the audio. I'll hear it on playback for sure. The audio had sounded clean to me, but it could be the StreamYard platform. Maybe they won't be giving me any endorsements because, yeah, it sounds really good when I have the headphones on. These are what we call in the industry. We call them cans, by the way, just so you guys know. And of course, by the way, it's raining in Southern California again. Just letting everyone know. I know that I kvetch about the rain a lot, but we've had a lot of rain lately. I'm really over it. At least the sun is shining, though. It is raining and the sun is shining. Back to what I was saying. So I think about, as far as I know, 3 children's lives were lost, 3 teachers. Obviously, the shooter's life was lost in a confrontation with law enforcement. I actually watched, I don't know why I did, but I watched the body camera footage, which is scary. That's some scary stuff. And I have never been a victim of I was almost a victim of gun violence. I have had a gun pointed at me in a threatening way, but I have not, probably shouldn't have said that actually. Hope my parents are watching. But I have had a weapon trained on me in a threatening way before a long time ago, and hope that never happens again. But I've never been an actual victim of gun violence. But it is terrifying. It is terrifying, and being a victim of violence when you are a child is really terrifying. So when I read the news and I see this happening, it literally, it's like I got into the DeLorean and the flashback, and I transported back to January 25th, 1989, or 1990, sorry, January 25th, 1990, which is the day that I found out that my mother's body was found and that my mother had indeed been murdered. And I had rightly presumed it was by my father. And I just remember, so I'll back this up a little bit. At that time, it was that day, January 25th, 1990, was my private school that I had gone to. It was called Discovery School. It's in Mansfield, Ohio. It's still there. We were having the Chinese New Year celebration. And that was something that my mother was very much involved in planning with. She loved Asian culture. She loved Chinese culture. My sister, who was adopted from Taiwan, shortly before then, 6 months, 7 months before then, my mother was very into Chinese culture. And at that time, we had in Ohio, we had the Son of Heaven exhibit, I think, which traveled all around the country, even around the world, which had actual the actual soldiers from underneath the Forbidden City, or from the Forbidden City in God, where is it? Underneath Tiananmen Square, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's where it's from. And my mother was very into that, and it was something that she had planned. And then when she had disappeared, she obviously wasn't planning it anymore. But I remember going in to the gymnasium during the celebration, and I had just come from the hospital where they had told me that my mother was dead. I came in, and I just remember, like, the younger kids, and so I was in sixth grade at the time, right? Sixth grade at the time. The younger kids, first, second graders, maybe kindergarten kids, were doing like little dances, and everyone else was just crying beside themselves because my mother was such a major influence on my school, with my friends, the faculty. She was on the school board. She was obviously planning this event, as I said. And just remember the looks of hopelessness on, especially like my classmates, right, who really knew my mother, because she would either take them to practice, or she would pick us all up at school and take them home, or they would come over and hang out and she would cook them meals or take them shopping or something of that nature, right? And I just remember how they looked at me, and the way that they looked at me wasn't necessarily because of that they were trying to figure out what to say to me, because they were trying to figure out what to say to me. They were trying to figure out what to say in general, because they had just realized a very difficult lesson that a lot of children, thank God, don't ever have to learn. And that someone that they were so close to had just been taken from them in the blink of an eye, really. And of course, a lot of kids go through trauma. A parent dies of a disease, or they lose their grandparents, which I lost 3 of my 4 at that time. Or they lose a sibling or a best friend or something terrible happens, and it's awful. But those are more of the rarities. And when it impacts your school community in that way, I mean, you're almost comatose. And I remember, for me, I remember thinking how, what is this gonna, what is gonna be the next step for me? And how am I gonna process all of this? How am I gonna process this for my friends too? Because they were all looking at me again, not because they didn't know what to say to me. They didn't know what to say because they were heartbroken. And they saw the pain in their parents' eyes. And it literally, when I see these things, when I see this school, because this wasn't like a high school. This was, it might have been all ages, I don't know, but I just know that the younger victims are like 9 years old, right? So that's around my age at that time. I was 12 or almost 12 at that time. So my classmates were 11, 12, around that age. But I had friends that I'm sure were 9 years old, right? And I just remember how lost we all were. And we had a school guidance counselor who had come to talk to some of the students, and his name is Dr. Dennis Maricas. He's in my documentary. I've interviewed him on the show before. I'm going to bring him back to interview him as well about childhood trauma. But we discussed, he was there to talk to other kids and about other circumstances. He just happened to be there on the day that this news unfolded, and how it was such a challenge for him and for the children to wrap their heads around what happened. And I hear this and it just, and I can just see all of it playing on in my mind. And I remember seeing my best friend at the time, Tony Timberman, and just him crying and just looking at me, and all my classmates, Brad and anyways, I remember their looks, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. Because at that moment, you know that your innocence is lost. And that, I think, is the most unfair thing when this occurs. The way that a child is now forced to process, because kids are supposed to go outside, they're supposed to play video games, they're supposed to play tag, hide and seek, have interactions with their family, and play sports and do whatever they want to do, read books, collect bugs, whatever, what have you, do finger painting. They're not supposed to think about what death looks like or what murder looks like. And that the fundamental core of humanity, the fundamental cornerstone of humanity that they know, which is kindness, love, happiness, giving of yourself, all that just gets rug pulled straight away. And for me, this still is something that I deal with in my life. I mean, you can see by my face, I'm literally sort of revisiting all this in my head. And some of the tools that I had to literally focus on right then and there. And I have talked about this before, but I think, and it's not even really fair of me to talk about this, because even though, yes, I found out my mother was murdered, I knew that was the case, or I hoped it wasn't the case, but I knew it was the case. So I was already processing it for 25, 26 days. But the work that I had to do with myself, and for anyone who's struggling to talk to a child or is in this situation to talk to a child, is you have to know that children are really resilient. We really are. And despite these horrific things that happen, to these very adult things that happen that we don't really understand how somebody could do this, they'll get through it. But it's going to take so much work, and it's also going to take such little judgment, because everybody is going to want to push and pull and tell these kids which direction they need to go. And one of the things that I had a real hard time with growing up, and this started in foster care, was being judged for everything. As if every outburst, every naughty little thing I did, everything as a child, that it was a normal childhood thing. I was a normal kid just being bad. I just wanted to do something bad. It was analyzed under the microscope of the trauma. And that's not fair, because I just was being a little brat, maybe. I was a good kid, but I might have been, I had my times just like everyone where I could be a brat. And I didn't have my mother's, watchful eye, like, nah. But for those of you who don't know, I grew up kind of terrified about my mother. She would give me this look, the evil eye. I knew if I did something wrong, I was going to get it. I was going to get punished. And, but you have to, it's such a delicate balance to not judge everything that these children will do moving forward without looking at them under the lens of them, of their behavior having something to do with the tragedy that has just unfolded in their lives. Now, I'm not saying that it's not, but you have to choose a lot of care. And I am in no way, shape, or form a psychologist, a specialist, a doctor. I am just a guy who has been through this, which I think gives me a little bit of street cred. You have to not project that on them. You have to not project your adult stuff, because kids completely, and I'm sure there's a psychologist that'll back me up on that. Children deal with things differently than adults do. We rationalize them differently. We assess them differently. We look at them differently in a way where there's almost not a silver lining, but there's still good and there's still hope in the world. It's very easy for everyone. And I posed a comment or a question on my Twitter yesterday on here on YouTube, asking how everyone was doing, how their mental health was, because it was a tough week. For a lot of people, it really brings up a lot of trauma. Somebody had mentioned 9/11. I remember when that happened, of course. All this trauma comes to the surface, but we have to be really careful that our adult selves who get stuck in the patterns of the world is dark, life is horrible, I don't know what's going to go on with my life, why are people so bad? Kids don't think that. They're not to that age. They haven't lived long enough to see that they just, and they're, I hope I'm articulating myself properly. Looking at the you've invited JJ Vallow's aunt. Who's that? Keisha, I don't know. I'm trying to read the comments too, without glasses, of course. You can't bring your adult stuff into when trying to assess this, because as children, for myself, I never just looked at the world as dark and hopeless and life won't go on. And I had a purpose in my life, of course, but my purpose also became what drove me out of my trauma in a lot of ways. And I refused to look at the world as a dark and dangerous place. I still do. I just talked about some really heavy stuff that I've been through. I still refuse to look at it this way. Now, it's not to say I don't have my bad days. I 100% have my bad days. And especially when it's crappy and rainy and cold, or it gets dark early, I like a lot of daylight type of guy. I like to be very physically active. If I don't really regulate my routine, my trauma starts to sort of get a hold of me. I'll be talking more about, and I have talked about it in the past. I will continue to talk about it because it's part of moving past trauma is you have to really regulate and get yourself into a routine, because that's ultimately what does that for you. And I think that maybe even cultivating that for children, because children definitely like routines. Routine of going to school, routine of eating, routine of having dinner at the same time every night, routine of going to soccer practice, baseball practice, what have you. That ultimately will help them as well, but they don't look at it the same way. That's my 2 cents on the situation at this point, because that's where we have to remove ourselves. We have to give the children the support, allow them to talk about it, allow them to grieve, but allow them to also have the hope in their hearts that everything's going to be okay and that the world is still a beautiful place. I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Murder. Thanks, y'all. And that I just do for the YouTubes. I'm here to take your questions. But I had to end the show. Now I'm going to get to some questions. Maybe I will turn on my phone or something. JJ Vallow is the autistic. Oh boy. So yes, the Lori Vallow case. I'll be talking about that too. I was interviewing somebody recently for the other podcast that is coming out that I do with Tara Newell called Survivor Squad. And we were talking to a woman who was in a documentary recently about Warren Jeffs, if you guys are familiar with that, also of the LDS or FLDS, Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints Church, and cults and things of that nature, which is pretty wild. Oh, look, I can make this really big. I really don't like wearing these glasses because they're reflective, and I know that annoys you guys. Let me see here. Let me take some questions. Interview Dave Navarro. Yeah. Well, Dave, so I was going to try to connect with Dave, but he had long COVID. So I'm going to have to revisit that because I think he's gotten better. We have a lot of tattoos. I met Dave Navarro like a few times years ago. Last time I saw him, I think it was 2014 at an event, at a fashion show I was shooting. Let me see. Okay, question. Do you think you could ever truly forgive your father? Yes, I have truly forgiven my father. I don't mean to. I know that a lot of times on the podcast when I do read his letters, which I have a couple of, I have these just for backup, just in case. Oh, I want to tell you guys about something super cool. So I'll answer your question in 1 second, Black Eagle. But I want to next week, next Thursday. So these are going to be a regular thing, 4:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. I am going to have Dr. Kenny Kinsey on the program. He was the forensic analyst from the Murdaugh trial. He's going to be joining me for a conversation about all things live, all things Murdaugh trial. I spoke to him on the phone a couple of days ago. He is a super nice guy, and he has the cutest little Southern accent. I just loved it. I told him about my story. He loved me. He's going to be on the show. It's going to be very exciting. I'm so stoked to have him. Just wanted to give you guys a little heads up on that. So to answer your question, Black Eagle. So I don't mean to give the, I don't want to mean to give the impression that I have not forgiven my father when I read these letters from prison. I have forgiven my father. I had to forgive my father. I forgave my father probably like, there was a few stages to the forgiveness, but I definitely forgave my father pretty much in 2010. And that was a thing. And there's a guy that I'm going to have on the show. His name is John Morrissey. He's a movie producer. He helped me make A Murder in Mansfield. He did a film called American History X. He's going to be on the program. I'm going to do it live downstairs here in my, but I won't do it live on YouTube, but I'm going to do it live in my studio and you guys can watch the episode. But he had noticed, because he's known me for 15 years, he noticed that around 2010, when my father wanted me to testify at parole and he said he was responsible for my mother's death, that I sort of had this whole passage and acceptance of what had happened. And it sort of freed me up to be the person that I've now become today, right? But the major key of that was to just surrender the thinking that was surrounded by forgiveness, right? That we have, there's a lot of stigmas, and I think it's been talked about a lot more now. Social media has made a lot of these things more open for people, but there was a lot of stigma around forgiveness, that forgiveness somehow equaled acceptance. And therefore, when you forgive someone, you accept that what they did, you accept, you not accept because you have to accept what they did because it happened, but you somehow exonerate them for what they did. It means that you alleviate them of all responsibility or accountability. And that's just not the case, because at the core of forgiveness is not them, it's you. You're doing them, and you're not even doing it for them. You're doing it for yourself, because you can't hang on to that stuff anymore. It just gets too much. And some people just never do. And I totally understand that. But yes, I have forgiven my father. I think probably what I have a hard time is less about the murder. I think just, I sometimes struggle with, like, how could you screw up your life so badly? Like, what was the purpose? What were you thinking? I think that's a lot of the things that when I read these letters, I get dumbfounded. And again, I do this to expose narcissism, gaslighting, manipulation, things that I dealt with as a child growing up, to expose them. And obviously many of you have been enlightened by those letters, but yeah, I have forgiven my father, but I still think he's an idiot. Collier Landry, what happened to your family's property? How are you able to get family heirlooms? Oh, so yeah, that's an interesting question. Luck of the draw. I was allowed in my house before they did the auction for 3 hours. And I spent about an hour and a half of that trying to play with my toys, because I hadn't seen the toys in probably like 7 months. Nobody helped me pick out any stuff. All the things that I wanted is family heirlooms that the lawyers had actually told me they were too expensive. You cannot take that. You are not entitled to that because we need to sell it at auction. Literally, there's so much stuff that is in my family. My grandfather's fireman's helmet. There are documents that my parents had signed by founders of the Declaration of Independence, signers, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Benjamin Rush. We have these documents. They were like a focal point in our little family area, if you will. They were from Philadelphia. My parents had a 4-hand placard, which Benjamin Franklin put out in the front of the cobblestone or brownstone buildings from the late 1700s, early 1800s, where it was a fire plaque, which meant that you had paid your taxes and the fire department would save your house. All these things, family heirlooms, priceless, have all disappeared. I never got anything. I randomly got some stuff. Most of the stuff that or a few, I guess a few items, my adopted parents had actually purchased at auction and they gave to me when they adopted me. So I have a few things like that that had come from them. I did get boxes of my father's diplomas and degrees. I did get a couple of my mom's purses and handbags, which I will eventually probably auction off at some point to either raise money for work that this program does or to raise money for a charity. But yeah, I got some stuff just because, and some people just gave me stuff. When I made a murder in Mansfield and I screened it in Mansfield, Ohio, I'm going to get up and show this. Should have this hanging up. My God, is it dusty? Oh. But somebody gave this to me because they had attended. This is a compass that my mother had in her office in our house. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'll tilt it down so it doesn't look wacky with the lighting. But that is something that, yeah, so people gave me stuff. It was great. And they come to see the film and they said, hey, we want to share this with you. New comments. Okay. I was only able to forgive my abuser because he took responsibility and we did therapy together. It was actually pretty beautiful and really difficult. Well, that's wonderful, Black Eagle. I'm so glad you got something. Oh, Jen Nelson, thank you so much. Oh, thank you for emailing. That's fantastic. And it's great that you've had some sort of closure. That's fantastic. There's this cool podcast, interviews with family members, the effects of murder. Who was killed, podcast is murder in the family. Oh, that's interesting to know. Thank you, Manic Alien. Manic Alien. Joe Ron. Hi. So Joseph Ron, who's on here, he is well, you can correct me in the comments, Joe, but he is my mother's cousin or cousin once removed, twice removed. I don't really know. Or we're somehow cousins. I can't remember exactly. Joe can explain that. But one of the amazing things about doing the film Murder Mansfield, I can remember where I was when I got his message and when I first spoke to him. I was at the Orpheum Theater in downtown Los Angeles. It was Valentine's Day, 2019. And I was there watching True Romance, which is a classic film directed by the late, great Tony Scott and written by Quentin Tarantino. I think it was his first script he ever sold. Fantastic movie. Dr. Zhivago, for those of you, if you know, you know. But that was the night that I first spoke to Joe and got to know him because he had seen A Murder in Mansfield. This is long before I did the podcast. And he reached out to me via Facebook. So it was a really wonderful moment. And yes, I do. I have my mother's eyes. Yes, True Romance for sure. Will I make a movie based on the documentary? That is something that is in the works, my family. That is something that I am looking forward to doing. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of things. Aunt Marie loved her. Collier, did you ever find out what? Oh my God. So Tana, interesting enough. It says, look for Yvette's question above. I'm going to look at that in a second. So yes, I did find out. I thought I covered this in the podcast, but maybe I didn't. So in the same time that these people gave me this print of a compass from my mother's office, which I totally remembered, okay. So it was the second day of screening A Murder in Mansfield in Mansfield, Ohio, at the Renaissance Theater, which in and of itself was an amazing situation because I went to that theater when I was a kid. My mother used to work there and volunteer, and she used to take the soda pop in the fountains and do suicides. I was not allowed to drink soda as a kid because she said my teeth would rot out. My mother was pedantic about my teeth, thank God, because they look great still. She would make the suicides with all the different flavors of pop. Yes, I'm from the Midwest, pop or soda. And so it was amazing because I had grown up going to that theater, and then to come back to be able to screen the film there was incredible. And it was the second day of our screening, and it was probably like 105 degrees outside. It was, July. This was like July 2018, 2019, something like that, 2018. And it was right before the film came out. And it was so hot outside, and the theater was like just the air conditioning running or whatever. And I was talking to they had a projectionist. He wasn't a projectionist. He was the guy that ran the audio at the theater, but he had to learn how to be a projectionist because they hadn't screened a movie there before. And we're at the scene, for those of you who haven't seen the film. And if you want to see the film, you can find it on Discovery Plus and all that stuff. But you can also find it and support this program by going to my Patreon. You can sign up at the lowest level. You will get access to commercial-free, the entire film commercial-free on my Patreon, which is collierlandry.com/support. If you want to check it out, A Murder in Mansfield. I'm going to just type that in, and I'm sure somebody else will as well. But you can join my Patreon that way, and you can watch the film, and it helps support this program. Because why give your money to Amazon? You can help the program. Anyways, I digress. There's a scene, and I won't give it away, but where it's a very tough moment that I'm going through in the film. And there was a woman that I had noticed in the theater early on. It looked like she wanted to talk to me, but I just kind of put it out of my mind. And because there's just so many people flooding me. So the projector dies right in the middle of this big scene. And I spring up because I either thought the projector had overheated, because I've seen this happen before, or even worse was the bulb had burst on the projector, which means we were done. And I run up and I see the guy in the booth, and he's like, and we both spring to action, and he runs up to the projection room, which is probably literally like he had closed the door, so the projector had overheated. Thank God it didn't blow a bulb, because then it would have been terrible. So we had a very forced intermission in the movie. And this woman who had tried to get my attention earlier on came up to me, and I might get emotional on this. And I had noticed her before, and I said, hi. And she's like, hi, Collier. I wanted to say something earlier to you before, but did you by chance have a wired hair fox terrier? I mean, I just immediately, like, waterworks, like, my eyes start welling with tears, and I say, yes. And she goes, we had your dog. I think we had your dog. And then she starts telling me this whole story, and she says how there was somebody who I think was like a housekeeper that my mother had hired, who ended up, because when I was extracted from my home, they told me I could come back and get my dog, which I never saw my dog again. And apparently this housekeeper, somebody that had worked for my mother or done some sort of, I don't know how she was related to us. I think she had done, like, come in and done maid service every once in a while. She had gained custody of the dog, and then she ended up giving it to this family, and this woman's family. They lived on a farm, and she told me all these stories, and I'm like, I'm going to cry now thinking about it. I'm literally like, just tears are flowing down my face, like, ah. And she's telling me how, and she's crying too. And she's telling me, she's like, I want you to know he had the best life. She's like, we grew up on a farm. We had horses. My parents had pigs, and he would literally, he was best friends with the pigs, and he would literally go in and sleep in the pig pen with the pigs at night. He lived to like 15 some years old, I guess. And he had the best life. And she said, they loved the dog. He had space to run, and he was just amazing. And again, as I say, there's not a lot of opportunities when you are a victim of violent crime to have moments of closure, but that was certainly one of them, for certain. Anyways, new comments are here. Thank you so much, Carol Gardner, for joining my channel. Thank you very much. It's wonderful. Right on, me too. Collier Landry, do I ever have nightmares of my mom coming to you? No, I don't. I have nightmares of my father, or a dark figure entering my bedroom. Those happen. I talked about that in an episode of the podcast. Mover Nation. I love it. Forgetful Lucy. Mover Nation. Thank you so much. Mover Nation. I guess that's a thing. Do we like that? I hope we like that. That's going to be a thing. Our family has lived at terrible incident and screwed up many family members. I'm so sorry, Joe. Do I still have any contact with the kids from my class in Mansfield? I do on Facebook a little bit, not too much. Probably my closest friend growing up, like we don't talk, and it's not because of me. I just learned that my mother's, friend who had testified at her trial, Marjorie Timmerman, had passed away. That was his mother, and so that was sad. That was unfortunate. I found that out because my new little Chihuahua, Marisol, which, by the way, guys, for those of you, oh no, I guess that's as wide as the camera goes. I'm just going to move this away. So, this is the official Marisol T-shirt that I sell on here on YouTube. I sell it through my store, and if you join my Patreon, you get 10% off merchandise. By the way, but I do that. Oh, I've got my hair parted to a different side because Eduardo. For those of you who saw the Instagram or the post earlier, I got my hair done before this because, I got my hair cut short, or I got my hair cut short for years, and then I let it grow out, as you see. And now when I loved having the long hair, but now when I watch the old episodes of the podcast, if I'm recutting stuff into it or I'm pulling clips from it for YouTube or social media, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I cut my hair. So now it has length and it's cool. And I've lost about 18 pounds this year. So my face looks better with this better cut anyway. So I digress. I'm very happy about my hair, which I got done today. But now I used to part it to this side, but he said you should try to put it to this side now just to break it up because the hair gets trained one way or another. I digress. You guys don't care about that. Let me see. Let me take a few more questions. You do have a great head of hair. Thank you so much. And I am very glad that I will die with a head of hair. I'm pretty convinced of that. So that'll be great. Did I ever attend the Renaissance Festival in Mansfield? No, I did not. As in like the Ren Fair? I mean, we have Ren Fairs out here in California. No, I never did. Well, if we had it when I was a kid, I'm sure I went to the Renaissance Festival. I'm sure I did. If it would happen when I was a child, for sure, because my mother was into that stuff. So I guarantee I went. Super chat question. Forgetful Lucy. Oh, I think I've just figured out who Forgetful Lucy is because she texted me. Oh, that's too funny. Okay. Yvette has a super chat question. It says, did I go to therapy or counseling during junior high or my teenage years? Did my adoptive parents help me along the way? Oh boy. I did go. So I was in therapy probably until I was like 14 or 15. And then I didn't go to therapy after that. It was a sort of tough situation. I think that my adoptive parents were, of course, are very supportive people. I think that just a lot of things were going on when I was growing up, and and therapy was not a sort of family foundation of our family. You got to think this is 30 years ago, and therapy wasn't exactly what it is today, and as widely accepted. But yeah, I did go to therapy. I went to a lot of the therapy that I was able to sort of work out for myself is I went to a lot of adoption groups, and I spoke to other adopted kids a lot, who were going through. So it was a really cool situation where, because of who I was and what I had been through when I went to these adopted groups, like these kids and they would go through, and just to give you a little background. So at least at that time in the state of Ohio, when you're adopted, if you don't know you're adopted, you don't know you're adopted. And you are given a file when you turn 18. Somebody shows up to your doorstep with a manila envelope and says, "Hi, I'm from the state of Ohio. here you go type thing. I mean, that's probably being a little too simplistic about it, but the purpose is they say, hey, by the way, you're adopted. So, and of course, a lot of kids, when they're trying to process that, especially when you're in your angsty teenage years, you're 18, they process it as a betrayal instead of a thing of beauty. I mean, that was one of the amazing things with me, is I was able to realize what a beautiful act that my adoptive parents, George and Susan Ziegler, did with me, taking on a child, especially a child who came from such a crazy background, that they were able to do for me, the gift they were able to give to me. And a lot of these other kids just grew up thinking that their mom or dad was their birth mom and dad. So they would sort of, just go off the rails a lot of times and get in trouble. They'd be in juvie, or they'd get arrested, or they would shoplift, or they would do drugs, or they would do things. And so when I would go to these groups, these kids who maybe they weren't 18, but they were coming into their teenage years, and they were adopted, or they came from the foster care system and then were adopted like me. I would kind of be this like sort of, not a sort, I don't want to say like a source of inspiration, but I would try to be like a source of inspiration for them, I guess, because they looked up to me for what I had been through. And it gave me a point of perspective and authority with them to say, hey man, you're good. Like, you had a family that loved you. You had a family that couldn't love you for whatever reason, drugs, alcohol, they died, whatever, financial, too young, whatever, what have you. But you were given a new lease on life, and you had people that chose you. You can't choose who your children are, just like you can't choose who your parents are, but you can, without question, choose a child and say, we want to bring this in. And I would explain to them, they wanted to bring you into their home. Like, that's more love. They weren't like, oh, she's pregnant. Okay, we got to deal with this. They're like, no, we want a child, and the amount of love and dedication and just planning that goes into that. And that is really is amazing. And so I was able to relate my own personal experience back to these kids, which really, that was something that was like probably way bigger than therapy. That was really therapeutic and cathartic for me, to be able to give back to these other kids and see that being impacted. And several of them, many decades later, came back to me and said, thank you for doing that to me. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for saying what you said to me. You really helped me at that time. And that's a really cool thing. Something I'm very grateful for. So I'm a true survivor, not a victim. Oh, well, thank you. I guess. I try to be positive, I suppose. Well, what else is Lucy sending to me? Perhaps we should know what people's handles are before they start. I'm so confused. You should check out the Bentonville Film Festival, Gina Davis. It's in the spring here. Is that in Ohio, Rhonda Weaver? Bentonville, or is Bentonville, Georgia? Your mother gave me dental cream that helped me. Yes, Noreen, Mom. It was absolutely amazing. Oh, that's so sweet of you to say, Joe. Thank you so much. Misdemeanor. Anybody watching anything good on television? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sheila Peevler. I'm full of grace. Oh, thank you. I'll remember that one. I'm glad you love the podcast, though. Thank you. I'm glad that what I do speaks to everyone's heart. That's really the best thing about all of this, is that it gives a purpose. It's in Arkansas. Oh, thank you so much. I actually don't think I've ever been to Arkansas. Yeah, rural Kansas. Then must have been memorable items. There must have been memorable items in Graham. I'm sure. Yeah, I just don't have a lot of that stuff because I do have I think I have somewhere my grandfather's pocket knife, Cub Scout knife. That was my grandfather's. But yeah, no, a lot of those things, everything got auctioned off. The lawyers wanted money. Sucks. Collier, have you ever done a reading with a medium to communicate with my mom? No, I haven't. Question, how did your experience influence your career? That is a question for another day, Black Eagle. I appreciate the question. That is a long-winded answer, and I want to do a full episode about that. So I'm not going to answer that now, but I will, I promise. I want to do a full episode about that because it is a very, very, very important question, and it is very key to my sort of growing up. Am I live every Thursday? Well, this is the first one, Roxy Olameda. This is the first live ever. And so it is my goal to do this every single Thursday. And this will be the podcast that you guys will watch on YouTube. It'll be podcasts you listen to. I'm with the sort of blowing up of my YouTube and with me really trying to be a better creator and get more content out there for you guys, which I'm working very diligently at while trying to work to keep the lights on, mind you. I'm going to try to do multiple episodes of the podcast a week because I'd like to focus on doing interviews. I'd like to be able to do these live interactions that we're having because this is really cool, by the way. And it's much better than Instagram because Instagram I got to do on the phone. And I don't know if I hate wearing the glasses, and the phone, I can make this a little bigger and it's easier for me to read. It's still a little fuzzy, but it's pretty good. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. Haverford, Pennsylvania. I see that. Hi, Christine Nelson. But yes, the mic is cracking. So I'm sorry about that. It is something to do with Squadcast, StreamYard. It is absolutely something to do with StreamYard. I'm going to have to troubleshoot this because this happened on a couple of other interviews that I've done via Squadcast. This is my Squad. I keep saying Squadcast. Squadcast is how I record my interviews. This is called StreamYard. They should be a sponsor of the show, but they should fix this first. I will fix it though. I will figure it out. I am a very technical person, just so everyone knows. I'm a filmmaker. If you saw all the gadgetry that's surrounding me right now, you'd be like, oh my God, like this is a cinema camera. There's all kinds of stuff. Lighting, it's all controlled by apps and everything. So I do my best, but I'll figure that out. But I will be able to, I will be doing a couple episodes a week now, which I'd really love to do. Love my guitars. Laura from Lakeland, Florida. Did you know that Lakeland, Florida is the lightning capital of the world? I don't think a lot of people know that, but now you do. The sounds better. It's not really that bad. Okay, good to know. Good to know. On the Outskirts, what's going on? On the Outskirts is going to be on the podcast as well. I interviewed her a couple of months ago. Her episode's coming out. Thank you so much for coming by and saying hi. Her episode will be out soon. I'm trying to restructure the show for you guys, and it's a constant battle of me just getting out of my own way sometimes. Also putting the content out in a different sort of timetable. So I'm restructuring that, and you guys are all going to get to have input on this, by the way, because I'm going to keep posting ad nauseum here on YouTube and on my socials about getting what you guys think. Thank you for also the intel on the microphone, because that's good to know. Because it sounds great through the headphones, through the cans, and so I'm curious. So I'm going to have to sort that out. I'll do some trial runs. Thank you so much for saying I'm doing an amazing job. Oh, well, thank you. I would love to get way bigger. This would be fantastic because this is all I really want to do. I really enjoy it. Joe Mattingly, it is quite obvious your mother was an amazing positive influence on you in the midst of his gaslighting and manipulation. Do you feel like you gained anything positive from my father? Yes, I do. I gained his height. I obviously got his genetics, and my father will be 80 years old in almost a month. And he's still alive, and he's in prison. He's been eating really crappy food. I know that that both sides of my family have really good genetics as far as diseases. Joe Ron can can weigh in on that. But I think that I got his height, I got his genetics. And look, my father is, despite his, which is probably why he's such a good psychopath, is he was very intelligent, just like my mother. So both of my parents really. Well, both sets of my parents actually are very intelligent people. My birth parents were college educated, Ivy League educated, just because where they grew up, there is an Ivy League school. Very fortunate, but they, Ivy League educated. Education was a big part of my foundation growing up. And then my adopted parents, who are not college educated, but are voracious readers, very intelligent human beings, and just very intelligent, very very well read and educated people themselves. So I had a foundation of education, which is, I think, very key in understanding the world is education. I think it was Samuel Clement that said something to that effect. I'm going to have to find that quote, aka Mark Twain. But yeah, I think yeah, to speak to my father's good qualities, yeah, his intelligence, his sort of veracity for knowledge. I remember when I was a kid, I would read his medical books. I was obsessed with the medical book that he had about John Merrick. For those of you that don't know who that is, that's the Elephant Man. So I'd read about that. And I remember the Viewmasters, if you guys have ever seen those, they're like red with a little orange thing. They're probably worth a small fortune on eBay now. But he'd had the Viewmasters of like dissection of like the heart and the kidneys and the lungs and all that. And I would like look through them, basically anatomy. I was a strange child. What can I say? What can I say? Just make sure you go live before 7 p.m. because I try to catch Why Flies Live. Why Flies Live? On Thursday. Oh, okay. So, but before 7 p.m. on the East Coast or the West Coast? Because I go live now before 7 p.m. On the West Coast, but not the East Coast. Original Alexa, thank you so much. And there will also be replays of this. I hope this is actually this is recording because I'm recording the sound and I'm recording the video on my camera and it's recording here. So I have 3 backups of all this just in case. I actually should see if this audio is. No, I guess it's not wacky there. Denise Smith, I too. I think Ohio is beautiful. Been there once in Lorain, Ohio, and drove through a beautiful river. So horrible, these crazy people targeting people. Collier Landry, does he write to women or do you visit him in jail? I have not seen my father in prison for a very long time. I guess he did have relationships in jail. That's a whole other nation. I think, Coffee and Collier Landry. Do these chats save? I think there's a lot of good suggestions. I'm just going to take a screenshot of this. Oh, come on. Really? Show. No, I don't want to hide. What? Show. Oh, I see what it did. There we go. I took a screenshot of that. You guys probably heard that, I'm sure. I like that. Coffee and Collier Landry. Am I a David Lynch fan? What kind of question is that, Paige Davis? What kind of question is that? I just quoted True Romance a little bit ago. Talked about True Romance. Of course I'm a David Lynch fan. Oh my God. Such a David Lynch fan. Oh. Mulholland Drive, literally. So funny story about David Lynch, but I wish I had an actual David Lynch story that I met David Lynch. But first music video I ever shot, which was like 8 years ago, which is very actually interesting given what happened in Nashville the other day. It was called Hope is Just Ahead with Dionne Warwick and Billy Ray Cyrus. And I'm filming with Billy Ray, who is like the coolest, sweetest guy. And very, very cool. I actually have a video somewhere here on YouTube. I know it's saved, but it's me playing guitar at Billy Ray, actually at Miley Cyrus's house with Billy Ray. He gave me a guitar. Billy Ray is a left-handed guitar player, and I'm a right-handed guitar player. And he had one guitar, and it was a whole story. I'll tell it another day. But anyways, we're hanging out, and he had been in Mulholland Drive, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I was very obsessed with a lot of the movies that came out around that time. Get Shorty, Bowfinger, Swimming with Sharks. They were all about LA, right? And then obviously Mulholland Drive, which was about LA as well. And this is all like, end of the 90s, circa, 2000, 2001. So we got in a whole conversation. I was like, Billy, you were the pool man at Mulholland Drive. What was it like to work with David Lynch? And he told me some cool stories, and it was really fun. But yes, so to answer your question, I am definitely a David Lynch fan for sure. I heard he can be a little difficult though, but who cares? He's David Lynch, right? Poor John Merrick. Yeah, right. Make the day count with Karen Fan. Hi, how are you? Forgetful Lucy commented a few merch ideas. Oh, merch ideas. Oh yeah, the Mover Nation offer coffee and Collier would be amazing. Yeah, I'm developing more merch too we're gonna have a what's going on t-shirt. Have I seen Repo Man? Oh, God, it's been a long time. It's been a long time. My Own Private Idaho is number one. I also have My Private Idaho story as well. Which I don't know if you got the pun, but Not So Private Idaho on that episode, probably like 2 months ago. Do I understand Spanish? Sí. Yo comprendo español. Los borrachos me enseñan solo las palabras malas. Pero. For those of you who said that, the drunks taught me all the bad words. I used to work in a Mexican nightclub and bar, Latin nightclub and bar when I moved to California. And I learned some Spanish growing up, which is why I have that's why my dog's name is Marisol, not Marisol. So I can do the trill of the R, but because I learned it when I was a kid. But I was the only white guy that worked at this place, and so I had to learn how to speak Spanglish and Mexican slang, and I learned how to speak Spanish, and because I needed to make tips. What's interesting is my Spanish is completely nowhere near the level of fluency that it once was, 15, 20 years ago. But every once in a while, I'll work with Mexican crews that come up obviously from Mexico and want to work with me and want to hire me as a DP or camera guy. And we'll start shooting together. And it'll usually be a week and a half. And by the end of that week and a half, I'll be speaking Spanish to the crew, and it'll be like they don't have to translate a lot with me. It's I wish my Spanish was better. I used to watch a lot of television en español, televisión en español. Actually, most recently, I watched a show called Amsterdam, for those of you that are into artsy, sort of weird, cool stuff. But it's entirely in Spanish, and it's about a dog. It's about a couple that gets a dog. But I watched Amsterdam, and I was like, yeah, I should really brush up on my Spanish, because it's something that I love Latin American culture and Latin America, and I love being able to speak the languages of places that I like to go. It's weird because I lived in Orange County for 2 years when I was working at that club, and then when I moved to Los Angeles, it's interesting because, so I can talk about this all day. When you speak to someone down in Orange County or like Santa Ana or wherever, they will speak back to you in Spanish if you're white. But if you are white and you speak to somebody who is Mexican or Hispanic in LA County, they will usually, almost always, speak back to you in English. And I always used to say the reason why I think they do that is not because they don't want to speak Spanish with you. It's because they are saying like, hey, we're in your country and we speak your language and we want to practice your language. So it's interesting. Why my neck is so crazy. So I hope that answers your question. I would love to do an entire episode in Spanish, but it's going to take a minute for me to get back to that. But because my verbs are always not the best. My verb conjugation is not always the best, especially when I'm talking about it in past tense. I have a lot of trouble with that sometimes. But yeah. Anyways, I was just talking about pastel tres leches today because I had that for my birthday. You have a brother in Torrance and a sister in the Bay Area. Oh, fantastic. Well, Torrance is like way down there. I can see the tower by LAX right now. I live in Santa Monica, for those of you that are curious. It's incredible. Is there a place that you have always... That's incredible, Lena. What's incredible? I hear you. I hear you there. I was stationed in Japan when I was in the Marines, and I spoke fluently, but if you don't use it, yeah, you lose it for sure. Yeah, especially Japanese. Like, man, that's a wild language. And I have friends that have lived in Japan that speak no Japanese. And one time I remember I had a hat on from a Japanese designer. I can't remember what it was called. And this girl who was on set, she said the name of it. And I was like, oh. And she read actually the Japanese characters that were on my hat. And then I took it off and I realized that she was saying that those Japanese characters were the actual name of the brand. And I had no idea. It was just really funny. And she said, oh, blah, blah. She was very fluent in Japanese. So yeah, is there a place that I have always wanted to visit? I mean, I've never been to Asia. Like, I mean, I've been to Australia, but that's not really Asia. I've never been to Asia. I've never been to China. I've never been to Thailand. I've never been to, I don't know if I want to go, I want to go to Bali. I don't necessarily want to go to Indonesia, but I want to go to Bali. I want to go to Japan. I heard that Tokyo is just insane. Speaking of Japan, Roxy Olameda, I've heard Japan is just like, all my friends are like, oh man, you got to go to Tokyo. Your mind will be blown. Especially who you are with all your artistic stuff. It'll be like sensory overload. It's like being in Blade Runner 2049. Let's see. Me too, Holly Hinman. Hi, Coffee Buzz. In 2021 to LA. I'm from Palm Springs in San Francisco. In San Francisco, now in Ohio. Paige, what a bummer. Ohio is beautiful, but you know. Hey, Yakima. All languages come back if you go to the given country within a day. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Went down to the Ace Hotel in downtown LA for David Lynch festivals. Yeah, I know that's cool. Is the Ace still here? I don't know. The Ace is still here because somebody was just talking about it the other day. There was a thing there. From Toledo to Florida. That was a good move. that was a good move, getting out of Toledo to go to Florida. Absolutely. Toledo is also in the 419 like Mansfield, but that is not a place I want to go. Come to Maine. Oh, fantastic. Let's go to Maine. Lobster, Wharf. My adopted parents love Maine. All right. Well, it has been an hour and a half. Tara Newell's back. Was it Tara Newell that I was discussing the Ace Hotel with? Probably. Marisol, me encanta. Ay, yo también, me encanta. La perrita reina. She's a doll. She's a doll. She's a doll. Thanks again to everyone in the chat. Forgetful Lucy, thank you all so much, everybody, for joining the program. This has been a lot of fun. I cannot wait to do it again. Do I still have a favorite childhood meal that I make? I don't think I eat anything that I ate when I was a kid, honestly. My mother made a lot of healthy food, but I mean, I was like a weird kid. I love like broccoli. I know it's weird, right? I definitely don't eat pasta anymore. I just kind of grew out of that. Pizza, occasionally, like who doesn't love pizza? Oh, sorry. Who doesn't love pizza? This has been a lot of fun. Está muy bien tu español. Ay, es metz. Poquito. I lived in Mansfield from 1966 to 90, moved to Central Missouri in 91. Well, it's 7 p.m. Time for the Y files. Fantastic. Great chat, everyone. Thank you, Holly Hinman. I love you all. Sad Keanu is sad. That's funny. I love you all. Thank you so much. I will see you next week with my special guest, Dr. Kenny Kinsey from the Murdaugh trial. We will talk about all things moving past trauma. I love all of you. Check out the replay on YouTube, which you might be watching right now. And see you on the flip side. I got to do this. I got to go. And then I got to go end broadcast. Hey. And it doesn't do it yet.